All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the House Environment and Transportation Committee bill hearings. Our first bill up is HB 43, Delegate Stewart, motor vehicle registration exceptions for golf carts.
We're not. Oh, can Todd come? Todd put his name in. It's cool. Okay.
No. Just the sponsor.
Okay, he's not letting you come.
Delegate Morgan, just the sponsor, please.
Yea or nay?
Please just sit at your normal table. You can chime in with great questions. Are we renaming the golf carts? Is that why you wanted Delegate Morgan?
Todd carts. The Todd carts. Mr. Chairman and Vice Chair, members of the committee, for the record, I'm Delegate Vaughn Stewart, and this bill is about golf carts. Year after year in this committee, as all of the returning members can attest, this committee hears bills about whether or not golf carts should be legalized on municipal and county roads. So we're not talking about state roads. We're talking about whether golf carts should be legal on county and municipal roads. And we, as a General Assembly, are one of the only states, I think there are 5 actually in the country, that require state approval to legalize golf carts on non-state roads. This bill is very simple. It would say that the new default rule is that basically golf carts are legal across the state on any road where the speed limit is 35 miles per hour and under. And there are a number of other guardrails in the bill, for example, that golf carts would have to be required to move all the way to the far right of the road, for example, in order for counties and municipalities to legalize them. But it would change the default rule. Instead of the default rule being that they are illegal until a county comes to us to beg for an exception, as they currently do, it would instead allow counties and cities as the default to make those judgments for themselves. And then the state could always step in to disallow it if we really wanted to. Now, why do we need this bill? Well, first, I just think from the standpoint of democracy, it makes far more sense for counties and localities and local jurisdictions who know their roads best to be making these very fact-specific decisions about which roads are well suited for golf carts and which ones are not. We are not the best decision maker for this. I think this fact is evidenced by the fact that if you look at any other type of vehicle, literally any other type of vehicle in Maryland that's kind of slow moving. So you think about farm vehicles, so-called low speed vehicles, e-bikes, in every scenario, even though these are slow vehicles that are not necessarily super crash worthy, that could be involved in and have been involved in accidents, in all of those cases, counties and cities can decide for themselves where they should be allowed to drive. It's only in the case of golf carts. This is the only example of any vehicle where the state legislature has to decide. The second reason is just that golf carts are good. They are electric generally. They don't emit any carbon into the air, and they're pleasant to drive. They're easier for older folks to use as they age. And when you have a nice volume of golf carts like we do in some touristy parts of the state, it provides a nice experience for both people in the golf carts, but also for pedestrians and cyclists because it slows down the speed of nearby vehicles. So with that, Mr. Chair, I will urge the committee to adopt a favorable report.
Thank you, Delegate Stewart. Delegate Baker.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Delegate Stewart, how are you all today?
I'm fantastic. How are you?
And just to start out my questioning to ease your stress level.
Yeah, it's high.
Do you know what the maximum speed a golf cart can travel?
I do. The average top speed of a golf cart in North America is 14.7 miles per hour. But some golf carts, if you modify them, can go up to about 25 miles per hour.
Okay, well, that debunks it doesn't, but it kind of debunks my thought. I was going to say, why not include four-wheelers? But I know they can ride much faster. Thank you.
Thanks.
Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing this bill. I agree with you that it seems crazy that we look at golf carts all the time. My question is, have you thought about putting in any kind of guardrails, if you will, around passengers and capacity of people? Because I don't think that golf carts have seatbelts, for example. And
Some do, some don't.
yeah, they're going to be driving on public roads. And so I just wondered if you'd give that any thought.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I think that we probably lack council would know, but we probably lack a generalized rule that you can't in a vehicle, no matter what it is, you can't have more passengers than seats. We probably do lack that kind of like fail safe. So I would be open to, there are several guardrails that you can see in the bill. We're empowering counties and municipalities, but with some guardrails. We're not letting them go completely crazy and allow these things on every road in every circumstance. And at every time of day, you'll notice that it's also from dawn to dusk, for example. I would be open to making sure that it's clear that counties can't somehow legalize 12 people in a 4-seater.
Right. Thank you. And obviously it's different than a car because the car is enclosed, whereas the golf cart a lot of times is.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want 12 people riding in a 4-seat car either,
Yeah.
but yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Delegate Healy.
It's interesting. I'm tired of seeing golf cart bills too, but I'm concerned about safety and also the interaction with other slow vehicles like possibly bicycles. If you're on the far right side and it's a bicycle lane or it's share the road with a bicycle, and then you have golf carts and bicycles and pedestrians and maybe scooters and all kinds of other things in the bike path, the bike lane, or the sharing the road with the other things. You may be creating more danger for all these different groups.
This is, a really interesting thought. And we thought about this too when we were putting this bill together, because obviously we don't want to, in the name of kind of empowering localities, we don't want to create additional fatalities, right? Obviously. However, the research that we looked at, first of all, in the bill, you'll see that golf carts have to move to as far right of their lane as possible, but not into the shoulder, and they can't go into a bike lane. That would be not allowed. So it's not going to be any more or less dangerous than a car that is also just so happens to be as far away from the median as possible in their lane. So that's no different than what the rule would be if a car wanted to drive on that side. Secondly, and kind of more fundamentally to the crux of the question, is that what the studies suggest is that golf carts actually interact far more peacefully than cyclists and pedestrians than do regular large vehicles. Because number one, if a cyclist gets hit by a golf cart at either the same speed or at the reduced speed that the golf cart can travel in, the likelihood that both the golf cart rider and driver and the cyclist all survive is something like 150% times greater than if it was an actual normal vehicle like a sedan or even a small like electric vehicle like I drive, like a Chevy Bolt. So, and also we think that in places that have like a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit or a 35-mile-per-hour speed limit, if the average speed of all vehicles drops to, let's say, 14.7 because there's a golf cart present, that actually increases the safety environment for all drivers, for all pedestrians, and for all cyclists. So we actually think, far from creating more problems.
Let me just get one more thing, and it has to do with the speed limit. That's a big differential for 35 miles an hour, and if what would you think about like lowering it to 25 miles an hour? There's a lot of municipalities where it's 25 miles an hour, or creating zones within municipalities that have some criteria laid out for the municipalities about what makes sense, what's appropriate and safe for these kind of things.
I think that's another great question. And we experimented with the idea of maybe doing a 25 or a 30-mile-per-hour speed limit, because I'm with you, 14.7 and a 35 does seem a little bit extreme. What we learned, though, is that across the country, because remember, in 46 other states, they do it like this. And across the country, sometimes you have 30-mile-per-hour maximums in state law. Sometimes you have 35. In practice, most local jurisdictions actually bring this down to either 15, like is common across Minnesota, 20, which is common in a lot of places in the Northeast, like New Jersey, 25, or 30, which seems to be kind of the industry standard. So even if we create a 35-mile-per-hour high, realistically, county folks and local folks, they care about whether their constituents live or die just like we do. And so they're going to craft the policy that works best for them. But what I'll also say is the main reason we didn't do it like that is because this committee and now Chair Love's subcommittee, but prior to her assuming that role, actually already gave several jurisdictions 35 mile per hour and under permissibility. So if we went lower in this statewide bill, we would either be forced to newly preempt those jurisdictions that we already gave a thumbs up to and which have already changed their rules, or we'd be in a situation where we'd have a hodgepodge. The reason we went with 35 in this bill is because we thought it'd be better to have a uniform state standard, knowing that if other states' experience are similar, that we're not actually going to see these things legal on very many 35 mile per hour zones.
Thank you.
Delegate Morgan, since I don't like to go to the table, do you have an "isn't that so" question you want to add?
We would love that.
I will say, oh, the microphone's off. Good. St. Mary's has experienced this golf cart bill for I can't tell you how many years. And we were coming back again this year with the bill. I believe this bill would complement what we're trying to do. Is that a fair statement?
I do. In fact, I think that if this bill passed, your bill in St. Mary's County would be duplicative and could be withdrawn, which would ease the burden on a very overburdened committee.
But I got to make sure that your bill's going to pass before I pull mine out.
That's true, but I'm doing so well that I think the indications are good, at least so far.
Okay.
You're as good as my snakehead right now.
Yeah, no, but I actually, you do raise a good point, which I forgot to mention is if you do look in your packet, not while I'm talking, but afterwards, there is a very, very compelling letter from the mayor of Crisfield, which I know is not your jurisdiction, but is obviously a city on the Lower Eastern Shore. She speaks about the process of how tedious it was for 4 straight years to have to come back to us every year, and all the taxpayer dollars and staff expense that went into that battle for 4 years to do this. And how now that they finally are allowed to have golf carts, they haven't had a single crash, they haven't had a single accident, a single injury, and it's been fantastic. So if you don't take my word for it, look, I think it's Mayor Taylor in Crisfield. Check out her written testimony. It's very good.
She's actually going to be testifying virtually, delegates.
Oh, perfect. I didn't know that she was going to make it virtually. Okay, well, that's even better. Don't read it, just listen to her words.
Great. Thank you, Delegate Stewart. I think we don't have any more questions for you, but we do have another in-person favorable witness. Maybe for the first time on one of your bills, Bruce Mariano, representing St. Mary's County.
I've been around long enough to know that this is the first time I think Delegate Vaughn and I are on the same side, but we are, and I'm pleasure. And thank you, Delegate, for putting this bill in. For the record, Bruce Mariano, I'm here on behalf of the mother county, St. Mary's County, in very strong support of this legislation. I'm not going to repeat what has been said and discussed in testimony and questioning, but this activity is going on in Maryland right now. I have a place and I spend a lot of time in Crisfield. Mayor Taylor, her testimony is going to be valuable. There's no problems at all. So this is just enabling legislation. So the notion of using golf carts in these highways has been long passed by this legislature. The fiscal note indicates those areas that allow it. And I'm sure in those counties where you represent, they can add the safety measures or any additional caveats that you may want rather than putting them on in this. There was a hearing yesterday of this exact same bill in the Senate Judicial Proceedings Committee. Went extremely well. This makes sense. I don't use a golf cart. I know I'm of age to use a golf cart, but I don't use one. But I really urge a favorable report. It's very active and important in St. Mary's County. I know living in Crisfield a lot these days, very actively used. And there is absolutely no problems. I mean, I see it all the time. People take them to the grocery store, they take them to the restaurants, they take them everywhere. So I would urge a favorable report, and thank you, Delegate Vaughn, for putting this bill in. Happy to answer any questions.
It's Delegate Stewart. Any questions for
One Stewart?
Mariano?
Yes, I apologize.
Great. I do not see any questions. So thank you. We'll now turn to our virtual witness, Mayor Taylor from the city of Crisfield, hopefully pop up on our screen. Delegate Otto, do you want to do her testimony? I don't know. Okay. She is apparently not available, and we do not have any other in-person witnesses for the bill. So that concludes the bill hearing on HB 43. We'll now turn to Delegate Robin Lewis, HB 28, the Pedestrian Fatality Prevention Act of 2024. If you have a
Mr.
panel
Chair.
or anything, feel free to bring them up.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I have one sponsor panelist who will be virtual, Angie Schmidt, I believe. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Madam Vice Chair, esteemed colleagues. Thank you so much for your attention. I'm Delegate Robin Lewis here on behalf of House Bill 28. This is some groundbreaking idea here before you. The Pedestrian Fatality Prevention Act of 2024 takes account of the reality we now face with the proliferation of overly large, overly heavy, and overly tall personal private passenger vehicles. Say that 3 times fast. These vehicles are now well established to be more likely to cause injury and death when they crash into pedestrians. This bill is called the Pedestrian Fatality Act because it attempts to measure and mitigate the negative externalities of heavy and big vehicles that cause so much harm on our roads. As all of you know well in this committee, last year, Maryland had the grim distinction of reaching a record high road fatalities. 600 or more Marylanders lost their lives on our roads. That includes pedestrians who are vulnerable road users, as this committee knows well. We've done so much in the state of Maryland to attempt to address road fatalities and injuries. This state passed legislation to create a Vision Zero program. A lot of my colleagues have done amazing work on pedestrian safety, and yet we hit this grim milestone of 600 more deaths last year. One strategy we have not yet tried is one that makes a lot of sense today in light of the results of a report, a study from the Institute for Highway Safety. Forgive me for not recalling immediately the agency name, the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, released a report last fall that reviewed almost 18,000 nationwide crashes and drew associations between the types of vehicles most likely to cause pedestrian death, and then identified the characteristics of those vehicles. And what we know now is that vehicles above a certain weight, I think it's around 4,000 pounds, and that also have a grille or hood height greater than about 40 inches, are 60% more likely to kill. Unacceptable, and something we can do something about. Now, the bill before you in its current posture, it doesn't encompass all of the ideas that I have about this. There are some amendments, and I believe the amendment language has been shared with the committee. We're waiting for the amendment office to deliver all of that to us. But what the bill will do first is increase license registration fees on vehicles that meet those weight and height criteria. The bill will further, with the amendment I've proposed, direct all the revenues from those types of vehicles into the statewide Complete Streets grant program. A lot of you know that we've never really adequately funded the statewide Complete Streets program. And if we can use revenues from a harmful phenomenon, drive those into a mechanism to mitigate that, then we will go a long way to keeping more Marylanders healthy and alive. With that, I'll thank you for your attention and ask for a favorable report. And I welcome the opportunity to have my sponsor panelist deliver her testimony as well. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Delegate Lewis. We'll bring up Angie Schmidt and then we'll do questions. Go ahead, Ms. Schmidt.
Hi, thank you for inviting me to speak, Delegate Lewis, and thank you all for taking the time to hear my remarks. My name is Angie Schmidt, and I'm an urban planner, and I'm author of the book Right of Way, Race, Class, and the Silent Epidemic of Pedestrian Deaths in America, which was published in 2020 by Island Press. And for the past 4 years, I've been writing and traveling around the country speaking about what I call the pedestrian safety crisis in the US. So at the time my book was published about 3 years ago, pedestrian deaths in the US had reached about 6,500 a year. And that was a pretty alarming increase, about a 50% increase over the previous decade. Now we've seen that problem get even worse. Just since the book was published, again, it was published in 2020, they're up about 20%. And we now have more than 7,500 people a year getting killed while walking. To put that number in perspective, it's about twice the number of people who are killed by fires every year in the United States. But the issue hasn't been recognized as a public health epidemic the way it should be. So the recent increase in pedestrian deaths has been caused by a lot of factors. Fallout from the pandemic, potentially lower police enforcement is in the mix, increases in speeding and reckless driving. But we also know, and what I discuss at length in my book, is that vehicle design plays an important role. Since the 2008 recession, SUVs and pickups have overtaken sedans and station wagons as the top selling vehicles. Now, almost 3 in 4 new cars in the US sold is a SUV or a pickup. And a number of studies, as Delegate Lewis mentioned, have confirmed the relationship between larger vehicles and rising pedestrian deaths. A 2015 review by NHTSA found pedestrians who were struck by SUVs were 2.5 to 3 times more likely to be killed. More recently, research by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety examined how square, more aggressive-looking front ends, which are in fashion right now in the automobile industry, contribute to the problem. Their study found that higher square front ends, at least 40 inches tall, that are now popular on mid-size SUVs and pickups are 45% more likely to lead to a pedestrian fatality. This is a regulatory failure. And I think that Delegate Lewis's legislation is a modest step in the right direction. So thank you for letting me speak, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Thank you so much, Vice Chair Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Lewis. Always good to see Baltimore City in the house. I wanted to go back to your, you mentioned a study. Did that study mention anything about farm equipment?
Thank you so much for that question, Madam Vice Chair, and giving me the opportunity to clarify.
Yes, ma'am.
The study didn't address farm equipment directly. It looked at vehicle weight and grille height exclusively. I want to make sure that one thing is clear. The bill before you intends to reduce pedestrian fatalities on Maryland streets and roads. The bill's intent is to focus on vehicles that are driven in places where there are pedestrians.
Right.
And typically on farms and in rural areas, the issue of pedestrian risk is much lower because there aren't sidewalks and people aren't walking. Right. So I think one opportunity we have is to make more clear that this bill has no intent to interfere with the way that vehicles are used on farms and in industrial sort of settings where big trucks and hauling vehicles, they're very much needed. Right. So I will mention, if I may, that I had a fruitful conversation with Mr. Hoff from the Maryland Farm Bureau earlier today to make sure I had a better understanding of the potential impacts this legislation might have on the agricultural farm community. I made clear as best I could that I have no intent to interfere with the agricultural sector, the ability of farmers, agricultural workers to do this sort of important and life-giving, economically essential work that they do. I'm thinking more about places where there are pedestrians and vehicles colliding. That has more likely in places that are suburban or urban. And I think there may be a way to make that more clear in the bill language, but in the current state code doesn't provide clear distinction between personal, private, passenger vehicles that folks use on an everyday basis in urban and suburban areas to go to the grocery store, or pick up your kid from soccer practice. Those are settings where heavy and tall vehicles are more likely to kill kids, seniors, and others. So I hope I've answered your question.
Yes, ma'am, you did. I'm hoping that we can talk about potential and an exemption for work, like farm equipment and vehicles. So thank you
Yes,
so
ma'am.
much.
Thank you so much.
Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thanks for bringing this bill. I definitely agree. It's something we need to address. I was glancing at it. And kind of a two-part question. Is weight the main criteria for these fees that we're assessing with vehicles?
Thank you for asking. The original language of the bill only addresses weight, but my amendment language will combine weight and height,
Okay.
real height factors. And I'll make sure that we're waiting for the amendment to come back from the amendment office, but I'll be sure to share just a typed up version of that for you.
Okay, great.
So we're really looking at vehicles that are above a certain weight and a certain grill height, front hood height,
Right.
40 inches or more, which for some of us petite and delicate individuals, 40 inches, that's almost eye level and more dangerous. As I recall, we're looking at cars between above the 3,500 pounds or so. Yeah.
Right. I ask only because I used to work for an automotive manufacturer, and aluminum is gaining more and more ground as a material, especially in SUVs, especially in these larger vehicles. So I don't know how much weight would necessarily, things could slip through the cracks if we go based on weight. So that's why I was asking. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Delegate Healy.
Thank you. And thank you very much, Delegate Lewis, for this bill. I have a couple of questions. Just to put a framework around it, can you give like a couple of samples of the vehicles that you're talking about, just by name brand? Is it like a RAV4? Or is it like a Highlander? Or is it like a Jeep? What we're talking about, so that I can visualize it.
Thanks for the question. I'm reluctant to mic drop any particular vehicle brand because that could look bad. So I'm going to attempt to describe in general terms. Imagine a vehicle that's shaped like a truck. It might have a flatbed, and it has a gigantic volume, a huge front end with giant wheels, like wheels you might see on a 18-wheeler.
Okay.
Huge wheels. A vehicle that you might need a step ladder, because you are like me, a petite and delicate person. You might need a step ladder to climb up into the front seat of the vehicle like that. A vehicle like the bill attempts to address is one that's the grill height is at eye level with you. So if you're
The top or the bottom of the grill?
the top of the grill,
Okay.
so the top of the front hood, it might be at your eye level or higher, so that if you're crossing the street and a vehicle like that's coming, you can't even see the surface of the hood. So really big vehicles in the United States, for a variety of reasons. I think there's supply and demand
Okay, so
forces, but
I just want to get a
Can you
handle
picture
on this.
that?
We're talking about like minivans and.
not minivans, ma'am, because those don't, these vehicles are shaped more like a truck might be shaped.
Okay, so like maybe like the trucks that like Amazon or FedEx uses on the roads to deliver stuff? Like these panel trucks?
Not a panel truck, one that has a hood, one that has a windshield and a hood. So it's not shaped like a van.
Okay, I'll just, maybe later on you could show me a picture of one.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank
Happy
you.
to.
Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for this bill. I want to first thank Delegate Boyce for bringing up the ag issue, because obviously in the rural counties, that's going to be a big issue. And to follow on with Delegate Healy, when you watch the Amazon trucks and the other van trucks, they don't necessarily, they're heavy, and they also don't respect speed anybody more than anybody else. But more in particular, I'm not familiar with the A, the E, and the M class. Does this also include electric vehicles?
Thank you for the question. There's no specific provision regarding electric vehicles in the bill. Strictly attention to weight and with the amendment, front hood height. So there are some electric vehicles that are quite heavy, truck style electric vehicles that don't emit greenhouse gases, but are really heavy. But it's not just the weight, there's a combination of forces. And if you think of physics, think of your high school physics, force is a product of, the size and the acceleration of an object. And so the size is not just a single dimension like weight. It has to do with volume or height or whatever. The forces are concentrated. If you imagine a crash of the 10-year-old kid, heaven forbid, sorry to raise this image, but a 10-year-old kid is probably smaller than the grill height of these truck style vehicles. And they're just more likely to be killed because the vehicle is heavier and the slope of the hood creates more force that is just more damaging to the fragile human body. This conclusion is based on a study conducted by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety that looks at both of those factors.
But isn't it also true, excuse me, please, that a vehicle such as that traveling at a high rate of speed also hits other types of cars and can cause as much physical and death as an individual walking on the street?
Yes, sir, you're absolutely right. Vehicle speed is one of the most important factors for risk of injury and death. But this committee, in its wisdom, has begun to tackle issues around vehicle speed. If I'm not mistaken, there are some jurisdictions that are able to set their own speed limits in particular places where they know there's high risk of crashes. There's Division 0 we've already passed that begins to look at speed as a risk factor. But this is something we haven't done yet. And let's look at one more factor that we can help to control and that we can use negative externalities to drive more revenue to our transportation system, to our pedestrian safety system. And I would just invite all of my wonderful colleagues on my favorite committee to think creatively about all of the ways we can intervene to keep people safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Delegate Jacobs.
Chairman. Delegate Lewis, I may not have picked up on all your clarification on your amendment. I know you talked about it was a height issue, combination issue, and is there any adjustment in the weight on your amendment?
No, my amendment doesn't address weight, but I'm happy to talk about that. And the great thing about me, Delegate Jacobs, is that I love to talk and work things out. So if there's a way forward on this bill that perhaps narrows the weight criteria, I'm happy to consider that. But I do think it's important to base any intervention we try on the evidence.
Right. I did look up a brand that starts with an R. I'm not going to say who they are, but electric vehicle pickup truck, and that happens to weigh 7,148 pounds. So it's over your maximum, and that's why I was asking that question.
Yes, sir. I'd be happy to impose greater fees on vehicles that big that are used in areas, suburban and urbanized areas where there are pedestrians walking.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do not see any other questions at the moment. We do have another. Thank you, Delegate Lewis. We'll see you in a couple of minutes.
Yes, sir.
We do have another panel in support in the room, I believe. Joshua Feldmark from Bike Maryland, Brian O'Malley from the Central Maryland Transportation Alliance. Is Brian here? Right, you're on your own, Josh.
Right. Good afternoon. Thank you, everybody. My name is Joshua Feldmark. I am here representing Bike Maryland. There is a reasonably good chance right now what you're thinking is, why are the bike people here on a pedestrian bill? Fair question. Let me see if I can answer it. So we are, of course, strongly committed to complete streets and having everybody on the roads, no matter what their transportation mechanism is, be safe. And as you heard, we had over 600 traffic fatalities on our roadways in Maryland last year. Over 30% of them were people not in motorized vehicles. And so we also know from the research that there are two main factors that change injuries into fatalities in traffic crashes. The first, of course, is speed, as we heard, and the second is the size and weight of the vehicle. And so because of that, we are 100% in support of this bill and urge a favorable review.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? Okay, last call for Brian O'Malley. Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on HB 28. We will turn back to Delegate Lewis with HB 107, the Better Bus Service Act of 2024. And if you have a panel, of course, feel free to bring that. Yep, please do.
Thank you. Should be enough room for all of us. Mr. Chair, thank you for coming. Oh, there he is. Okay, great. Can we bring one more slide of chair up for the fifth panelist? Thank you. Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, Delegate Robin Lewis here on behalf of the Better Bus Service Act of 2024. Thank you for your attention. By now, honestly, I think you guys have listened to me talk about dedicated bus lanes long enough, but I will very quickly walk us through what this bill is about. So this bill was introduced last year in a sort of, a very rough format. We've come back now, having done a lot of work, a lot of conversations, meetings, tours, and very thoughtful and serious analysis of opportunities to make our bus system deliver better service. This is a statewide bill. This is statewide enabling legislation that will allow transit agencies to use bus-mounted, forward-facing camera technology to monitor obstructions in dedicated bus lanes, thereby protecting the movement of those buses. And when I say protecting, I use that word deliberately because I believe that Marylanders who use buses and transit are left too much to their own devices and not prioritized. And I believe that by protecting or enforcing dedicated bus lanes, we deliver better service for Marylanders who deserve better. Now, I will mention that the bill before you has been amended. This was pre-filed in early December, and since then we've had additional refinements and amendment language. The amendments, I believe, have been shared with the committee. We're still waiting for them to come back from the amendment office. But I believe we have shared what those amendments look like. So the bill before you is not exactly in the final form. So thank you for your patience in that regard. We'll talk it through. Buses are the workhorse of our transit system. It doesn't really matter what else we do, how many billions of dollars we spend on rail and other modern technologies. If the buses aren't working, then we're really not delivering for the people who depend on us. Every week, hundreds of thousands of frontline workers in healthcare, retail, education, people with disabilities, middle and high school students, seniors, and others depend entirely on buses to get where they need to go, and they deserve the best. They sent us here to deliver the best. This bill is similar for some of you. Remember House Bill 53 that we passed in 2022? That was enabling legislation, a local bill for the Baltimore City Department of Transportation that gave the city the authority to use camera technology to enforce dedicated bus lanes. That bill did not specify the type of camera technology. It was left deliberately generic. The Baltimore City Department of Transportation is here and they'll be able to talk with you about their program. But at the time of the bill, the technology for monitoring lanes wasn't as evolved as it is now. And at this point, we know from the experience of other states and cities that onboard forward-facing camera technology can be used effectively to improve bus service. And so I want all transit agencies around the state to have that opportunity. I'll say that there were some important concerns raised about last year's bill, and I believe we've tried to fix those. And I'll just refer to them quickly. We'll let, I have my experts here who can talk more. But one of the things we clarified in the amendment language is that local jurisdictions can choose, if they wish, to use camera technology to enforce the movement of buses at different types of transit stops, not just on dedicated bus lanes. They can enforce parking and standing in their bus ways, should they wish to. This is enabling for them. Privacy was an important concern mentioned. With the proliferation of camera surveillance in our society, it's really important for us to attend to privacy protections. And the bill before you doesn't include privacy language, but it does in the amendments, where we can talk more specifically with one of my panelists about the privacy protections we're proposing that will describe how cameras should be angled, mounted, the duration of retention of surveillance images, and when those images are destroyed. There's a prohibition in the amendment not to utilize biometric identifying technology, and that includes but isn't limited to facial recognition technology. So I believe we've tackled as best we could the concerns that were raised last year. And I would ask my colleagues to think about your constituents who depend on riding the bus. No matter where you represent, those constituents need you to stand up for them. They're the least likely of our constituents to come to Annapolis because, unlike me, they can't necessarily Uber down. And if they depend on buses, they can't even come to lobby you. So think of them and do the right thing for them. And I urge your support for this bill. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. I don't know what order you want to do your panel in, but feel free to.
Yes, sir. If I may, I'd like our agency representatives to speak. So we have a representative from WMATA and then City DOT. And then we have, Montgomery County. The chair, we brought someone from Montgomery County, from Montgomery DOT.
You looked at me and you just thought WMATA.
I immediately. And then the city is here. Yeah, then the city, and then my camera technology expert, Mr. Katz, if that's okay. So MoCo dot, WMATA, MoCo dot, city dot.
All right. Thank you, Delegate. Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. For the record, my name is Charlie Scott. I'm Government Relations Officer for WMATA. And I'm excited that with passage of this legislation, that the Clear Lanes project that we've initiated in the District of Columbia could expand here into Maryland. For Metro bus routes that we operate in the district, a portion of our bus fleet is now equipped with the cameras that Delegate Lewis mentioned to detect and record vehicles that are blocking bus lanes or bus stops. The bus stop enforcement started in late 2023, and ticketing of vehicles blocking dedicated bus lanes started just on Monday. Our focus is on improving the customer experience, and for our bus customers, we know that on-time performance is one of the key factors in improving customer satisfaction. The ability for our buses to make full use of dedicated bus lanes will improve reliability, making bus service in these corridors even more attractive to new customers. We want to extend the same customer service improvements across the region, and HB 107 is key to enabling this here in Maryland. We now have more dedicated bus lanes in Maryland than we've had before. It's still more prevalent in the district, but in Montgomery County, we have a new segment on University Boulevard opening. And then also in the past couple of years, we've been working with MDOT SHA on plans for targeted bus lanes in Silver Hill Road in Suitland and also George Avenue in Silver Spring. 100% design for those projects was actually completed just last week. As Delegate Lewis mentioned, another great benefit for this program is also to our ADA community. Across the region, our jurisdictions have made investments to ensure that our bus stops are ADA accessible. Ensuring that buses can access these stops and deploy the ADA ramps is the safest way to serve customers with mobility needs. The amendments that Delegate Lewis mentioned are very vital as well, and we appreciate those additions to the bill. So thank you and ask for a favorable report.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee, and thank you, Delegate Lewis, for introducing this legislation. In Montgomery County, we have been actively implementing bus lanes throughout the county. A couple years ago, we had a measly 1/10 of a mile near the Silver Spring Transit Center, and we will be up over 12 miles in the very near future with implementation of the projects that we've worked collaboratively with the Maryland State Highway Administration and WMATA to implement, as you heard about a moment ago. In order to achieve the value that we're looking to get out of these bus lanes through improved transit service, better reliability, lower operating costs, and better customer service, these lanes need to be clear of motor vehicles that aren't intended to use those lanes. We believe it is unreasonable to expect our personnel, our police personnel, to be able to effectively perform this function in in-person enforcement, and that can also lead to other concerns that we would like to avoid. The District of Columbia's implementation of the automated bus lane enforcement is a roadmap we would like to follow, working in partnership again with WMATA to install the camera technology on buses that are serving routes in Montgomery County. And we look forward to being able to make full use of these lanes and achieve some of the other benefits that the bus lanes provide, which include better buffering of the sidewalk to separate higher speed personal vehicles from people using the sidewalk, and creating a space that's more suitable for bicycling than a general purpose lane, although not a dedicated bike lane by name. So again, I thank you for hearing us today. We look forward to a favorable report from this committee, and happy to answer any other questions about bus lane implementation in Montgomery County and why this is such a vital element of our transit program.
Chris, can you just identify yourself for those of us who don't know you?
Thank you. I'm sorry for that. I'm Chris Conklin, Director of the Montgomery County Department of Transportation.
Great.
Great. Thank you. Liam Davis, Legislative Affairs Manager for Baltimore City DOT. I want to start by thanking Chair Corman and Vice Chair Boyce and the whole committee for taking time to consider this important effort. In Baltimore City, we have roughly 20 miles of dedicated bus lanes currently installed across the city. And expanding enforcement across the region will have an across-the-board positive impact in terms of improving bus reliability. When utilized properly, their installation not only prioritizes transit ridership, but also serves as a tool to calm traffic. Monthly coordination with MTA on advancing this program is something that we're doing consistently. And MTA is actually assisting with research, including focusing on where the installation of these cameras will make the most sense from an impact to transit operations. And I do want to be clear, we do have this authority already in Baltimore City, but we see value in it in expanding. City DOT recently achieved a project milestone for our program, securing NTP to move forward with the competitive bid seeking process. This was amended into our legislation by the Senate for enabling legislation. And we are still on track for the program deployment to occur towards the end of FY25 into early FY26. I'm available for any questions. Thank you so much.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to testify today. My name is Dan Katz, and I am Vice President of Public Policy for Hayden AI. We work with transit agencies, including WMATA, to help combat obstructions that undermine safe and reliable public transit. We strongly support HB 107 because it would allow transit buses operating in Maryland to utilize the same technology currently authorized, not only in DC, but also New York, California, Chicago, and Philadelphia. This technology is working to fix a longstanding problem. Illegally parked vehicles obstruct transit buses, which makes roads unsafe and keeps riders from reaching their destinations on time. Whether blocking a dedicated bus lane, parking at a bus stop, or double parking into a traffic lane, illegal parking greatly undermines the safety and on-time performance of transit buses. Enforcement of legal parking in bus stops is critical to reduce hazards, especially for people with disabilities and seniors. For example, blocked bus stops makes boarding dangerous and sometimes impossible for wheelchair users because bus operators are unable to properly deploy the wheelchair ramps from their bus if they cannot pull up to the curb. For a disabled person, A blocked bus stop can mean the difference between reaching their destination on time or late, or in some cases, not reaching it at all. And on privacy, this technology is focused on objects, not people. The bill requires all evidence to be destroyed when not relevant to an offense or an active citation. And finally, this technology, it works, it changes behavior. In New York, where it's been in place for the longest, we've seen improvements in bus speeds by 36%, collisions down by 34% involving buses. And these are just some of the safety, accessibility, and performance improvements that this bill can bring to Maryland. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that it for your panel, Delegate Lewis?
This is my sponsor panel, yes.
Great. Do I have any questions for this panel? I do not see any. Great to have you back in Environment and Transportation, Delegate Lewis. We
Great to be
have
here. Thank you.
other in-person favorable testimony. We have Dan Reed, Greater Washington, Joshua Feldmark, Bike Maryland, Christopher Tippery, Montgomery County Police Department, Sarah Sample, Maryland Association of Counties. Come on up. Dan, go ahead. Okay, someone else go ahead. Someone start.
All right, I can go ahead. So, hello, I'm Sarah Sample from the Maryland Association of Counties. Thank you to the chair and members of the committee for having me here today. So we are here in support of House Bill 107. So this is obviously authorizing us to use bus lane monitoring systems in designated bus lanes. So this is authority that we don't take lightly. This is something that we carry a heavy responsibility with when we are deciding to implement programs like this. And we certainly do think that it could bring about more transportation equity. To give you a little bit of a sense of relevance across the counties, we currently have 3 jurisdictions that have dedicated bus lanes. We've got another 4 that are currently under roadway renovations that are bringing dedicated bus lanes to their jurisdictions. And then we have a number of other counties that are considering roadway renovation plans that would also incorporate designated bus lanes. So we think that getting ahead of this now is really great in terms of deterring certain behaviors in designated bus lanes rather than trying to correct bad behavior after it starts. And that certainly will make the citation numbers go down, which we think is a good thing. In terms of implementation, this is typically rolled into our law enforcement agencies or our local transit authorities. And so we think they would be able to roll it into some of their existing programs. And the ones that don't already have automated enforcement, because not every jurisdiction enacts some of the authorization that we get for certain cameras. The ones that would be enacting this new, because there's a fee associated with it, they would be able to subsidize some of those costs for setting up the program. So we do think this is something we would be able to roll out effectively. But ultimately, we really appreciate this authority. We have an incredible responsibility when it comes to utilizing this authority, and we would support House Bill 107 and urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Go ahead, Josh.
Bike people say us too.
Set the tone. Mr. Reed.
All right. Hi, I'm Dan Reed, the Regional Policy Director for Greater Washington, and we strongly support House Bill 107. As has been noted several times, Maryland has a growing network of bus lanes, which are giving thousands of bus riders a faster, more reliable trip each day. But we only get the full benefit of the public's investment in bus lanes when they're clear and free for buses to move. The Better Bus Service Act would make it illegal for private vehicles to not just drive in a bus lane, but to park or stand in a bus lane, and then it would allow local jurisdictions and transit agencies to use automated traffic enforcement to keep them out of bus lanes. And it's been shown already to be effective at changing driver behavior. I worked as a transportation planner for many years, and I know there are a lot of just things and activities competing for space on the curb. Bus lanes are one of them. There's also bike lanes, parking, deliveries, pickups and drop-offs. And this bill would also, my understanding, would create a work group on curb space management that would provide recommendations on how to manage all of those competing uses, which will make our streets work even better for all the many people who need it. So we believe the Better Bus Service Act will ensure that Maryland roads work better for everyone, while ensuring that bus riders and other travelers can get where they're going reliably and safely. So we ask for a favorable report. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Carrie Kasicki, and I'm speaking on behalf of the Coalition for Smarter Growth, and we strongly support this bill. So we're really excited about the plans for tactical bus lanes on Georgia Avenue in Silver Spring and Silver Hill Road in Prince George's County. We're also really excited that these projects are collaborations between WMATA, the county DOTs, and SHA, and that we have a shared commitment to making bus service better for riders. So dedicated bus lanes can make service better and faster for people who depend on the bus, reduce greenhouse gas emissions from attracting new riders to public transportation, and also, as was mentioned earlier, make taking the bus safer and more accessible for people. On Georgia Avenue, exactly where the tactical bus lanes are planned, I am frequently one of the riders who is forced into the street by cars that are parked or, waiting, picking up food, whatever, in the bus stop. And, you see people using wheelchairs or on crutches or small children walking out into Georgia Avenue just to take the bus. So it creates a really, really bad situation for folks. So without the ability to readily enforce prohibitions against stopping or parking in bus lanes, the jurisdictions that invest in these won't realize the full value of their investment, and riders also won't experience the full benefits. So we strongly support this bill. It will allow local jurisdictions to actually enforce these rules, get the full value of their investment, and also make bus service faster and better for riders. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for this panel? I do not see any. I just want to confirm that Christopher Tippery is not here and Brian O'Malley. Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on HB 107. We'll now turn to HB 49, Delegate Taveras. Vehicle laws on authorized registration plates prohibition.
I'll be quick and easy for you guys. Thank you, Chair Corman and Vice Chair Boyce. Good to see you guys and everyone in this esteemed committee. It is an honor to be here before you today. I am here to ask for your favorable report on HB 49 unauthorized registration plates. This is a crucial bill, which I bring to your attention. It aims to prohibit the display or possession of unauthorized license plates that do not comply with our state's regulations. In recent years, our state has faced a troubling rise in the use of fraudulent license plates, often linked to the illegal practice of curb stoning in the community and other illicit activities. Prince George's is home to the largest number of Texas and Virginia plates than anywhere else in the state. Texas has been forced to address this legislatively, but we still face challenges. This is not merely a violation of state law. It represents a significant threat to the quality of life and well-being of our citizens and the fairness of our vehicle market. Too often, I see these illegal and expired plates throughout my community from Texas and North Carolina, or see individuals at my local Staples store Xeroxing these plates to be illegally placed on vehicles. This is one of them that I took a picture of in my community. This is from North Carolina. The date was from 4/19/23 to 6/18/2023. The identification number was faded, and I took this in October. This illegal activity undermines state revenue, evades insurance and registration requirements, and places undue burden on law-abiding taxpayers. It is a challenge that demands our immediate and decisive action. Through this bill, we seek to address these challenges head-on by increasing fines from $5,000 to $10,000, with the potential increase to our state coffers to the tune of $1 million per the fiscal note. I urge this committee to consider the far-reaching benefits of this legislation. This bill is not just a regulatory measure, it is a statement of our dedication to safeguarding our community, upholding rule of law, ensuring a fair and just marketplace for all. So in closing, I ask this esteemed committee for your favorable report on HB 49. Thank you.
Thank you. We do have some questions. Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Taveras, for bringing this bill. This is a big problem, I agree. But I have a question about the wording of the bill, and maybe I'm just not reading it correctly. It seems to say that if you knowingly buy any registration plate that is not issued for the vehicle, is not otherwise lawfully displayed, et cetera. Are you trying to get at vehicles with license plates that are bought to appear that the vehicle is from out of state, or are you actually wanting license plates that are on vehicles that are housed and driven in Maryland, or where the owner lives in Maryland, that are displaying plates from other states?
Ma'am, okay, let me try to explain what's going on.
Okay.
These plates could be bought online for like $100. Okay. It's an underground market.
Okay, so you're not talking about someone who has lived in Virginia, has a car with Virginia plates, moves to Maryland, never changes the plates. You're not looking at that person. You're looking at someone who buys a plate to commit fraud. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
You are circumventing insurance.
Yeah, I get
mark
it.
and registration mark and registration of the vehicle.
Thank you. Thank you.
Delegate Long.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Delegate, thank you for being here and bringing this bill forward. Just curious to know, do you have any data about referencing how many illegal plates are perhaps in different jurisdictions, or Prince George's or the like?
Like I said, according to the police chief in Prince George's County, Prince George's is home to the largest number of Texas and Virginia plates.
I think it may be 16,000. Isn't that so? Thank you.
Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Delegate Taveras. I feel ignorant because until a couple of weeks ago, I didn't even know this was a thing. So first, a quick question. What is curbstoning? You said curbstoning?
So curbstoning is the definition of lining up cars on a street to sell them through illegal dealerships.
Oh, my goodness.
And in my street on Eagle Road, on Riggs Road, if you drive by in my neighborhood, you see that this is a mechanism where you have a line of cars that are being sold illegally. Because illegally you could sell up to 3 cars on your own, right? But the thing is, these people buy and continuously resell.
Thank you. Thank you. And if there are other delegates working on this issue, are you open to working with them to try to work out the?
I work with everybody.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm going to make that even
Thank
more
you
direct.
for joining me.
Yeah, I'm going to make that more direct. Make sure you talk to Delegate Addison. Delegate Baker, you have a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm really somewhat confused. You said it's a black market tag. So is it legal or illegal in North Carolina?
Well, I can't, the thing is that people are buying, either a dealer in North Carolina is giving permission for folks to get access to this type of plate. And it's happening all over the country. It's not just here. I mean, in New York, let me just highlight the New York City numbers. I think that they captured over 12,000.
So is it a legal or illegal activity?
It is an illegal activity. It increased 300%, and they had 3,568 arrests in 2021, just in New York, on these issues, on this very same issue.
Thank you.
I do not see any other questions. So Delegate Taveras, I think that concludes the bill hearing.
Thank you
HB
all so
49.
much.
Thank you. Colleagues, we'll now turn to HB 77, Delegate Munoz, Motor Vehicles, Parking Armed Forces Special Registration Plates. And if you have a panel or anything, please feel free to bring them up.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Environment and Transportation Committee colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Rachel Munoz, and I appreciate the opportunity today to come before you to present House Bill 77, Parking for Armed Forces Special Registration Plates. I was asked to bring this bill by a distinguished military veteran who I am proud is a constituent of mine, and I appreciate you allowing us both to come and speak to you today. This bill would allow our proud military service members and veterans with combat-related armed forces license plates and Gold Star recipient license plates to park without cost at parking meters across the state. With the amendment that you have before you, this bill has a bipartisan cross-file in the Senate, SB 584. We've reached out with and are working with both MACO and MML, and we believe that this amendment will make this bill work for everyone. States all across the country have already enacted similar legislation. With the amendment, this bill will affect just under 1,600 license plate holders in the state of Maryland. You will see that we have letters of support from the Veterans Caucus and the Maryland Military Coalition, who in their letter of support said that this bill recognizes the fact that each has either honorably served our nation or, in the case of Gold Star recipients, had a family member who made the ultimate sacrifice for our country. It is the least we can do for all of them. They strongly support this bill and believe it builds on the governor's year of the military families. Our military members and veterans who've chosen to live here in our great state of Maryland have given so much to this country, and we can never truly repay them and their families for their sacrifice and service. I hope with this small bill, we can show our support and appreciation for our distinguished combat decorated members and veterans and the families that they have had to leave behind after giving the ultimate sacrifice for all of us. I truly appreciate your time and the opportunity to present this bill to you all. I respectfully request a favorable report on House Bill 77.
Environmental and Transportation Committee, thank you for letting me visit. My name is Joseph Dolan. I'm a resident of Anne Arundel County. I'm here to seek support for House Bill 77. I'm in favor of this bill, and I know that it would have a meaningful financial impact on me and my family. This law would change the laws for parking in Maryland for combat decorated veterans. As a specific example, I'd like to reference the state of Texas. Current legislation in Texas allows veterans with specific military decorations to park in public for free anywhere in Texas. Clearly, Maryland is home to multiple bases such as Fort Meade, Andrews Air Force Base, U.S. Naval Academy. Veterans who have served and continue to serve at these locations are important members of our economy and our community. Many of them have made significant sacrifices, and I think it would be right for Maryland to support them with this simple but important benefit. I was in the Navy for 10 years as a pilot, and for my full-time job, I'm an airline pilot, and I work out of BWI. Like many of my coworkers, I flew combat missions in OIF and OEF, and I've been awarded an Air Medal for that service. The parking at BWI is both expensive and time-consuming, often requiring more than 30 minutes from remote employee lots to the terminal. If I choose to circumvent the shuttles, I can park in the hourly garage for roughly $3,200 per year, just to park. Conversely, I personally know many pilots in both Houston and Dallas, Texas, who have identical military decorations, who are allowed to park at their airports for free. Texas has stood up and thanked their decorated veterans, and I think Maryland can and should too. I also recognize that this legislation would be assigned a financial cost to weigh and debate. My plea on that topic would be when combat decorated veterans were asked to accomplish a task, they didn't balk at the cost. I don't think Maryland should either. In conclusion, I strongly support this legislation. In order to thank our Maryland's combat decorated veterans, I appreciate your time and consideration, and I look forward to moving this issue forward.
Thank you, Mr. Dolan. Thank you for your service. Let's turn to Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate, for bringing the bill. Good to see you. I have a clarification question, and then, well, I have two clarification questions. The first one is, you talk about that this would be not requiring a payment of a fee for parking a motor vehicle in a parking space served by a parking meter. there are some parking garages that have parking meters in them that are actually like parking garages, right? Is that also encompassed by this bill? Are those spaces also encompassed by this bill? Okay. So you're talking about on-street parking basically with a parking meter. Okay,
Yes,
thank you for
Delegate,
that.
thank
Yeah.
you for the question.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And then I assume also that you're not talking about just letting, obviously disabled veterans are a special case, but you're not talking about letting veterans, for example, park in spaces reserved for disabled people, handicap parking spaces, right? That's not.
No, not at all. And you'll
Okay.
see with the amendment, we're actually replacing the disabled veterans with the Gold Star families plates because that reduces.
Because they already get a space.
Yes, yeah. And that reduces, because when we looked at the total numbers, we're talking over 20,000 disabled veteran plates in the state. But if we just stick with the combat awarded plates, we're down to below 1,600. So the financial cost is like greatly reduced.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Boyce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate Munoz. I just want to clarify, this is a mandate and not enabling.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Ciliberti.
Mr. Chairman, this doesn't have anything to do with the bill. I'm just curious. You mentioned you're a pilot. What do you fly?
What do I fly now?
Yes.
737s.
Okay. And prior to that?
P3s is what I started on. If you're familiar, it's a Navy 4-engine propeller. And then King Air 200s, 8-passenger, 2-engine.
Thank you.
Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. A quick question, Delegate Munoz. You mentioned that with your amendment, you had a cross-file in the Senate. And who would that be and what is the bill number?
Yeah, so it's SB 584, and it's a bipartisan cross-file with a number of both Republicans and Democrat senators. And I don't think I mentioned this, but I was so excited about this bill. I pre-filed it before the start of session on my own, but now that we've been working on it, we have a lot more support.
Got it. Thank you very much.
Sorry, it was bipartisan. It was Republican and what kind of senators?
Democrat?
Okay.
Senators?
Okay, any further questions for this panel? Okay, thank you for the bill, Delegate. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 77. We'll now call up HB 102, Delegate Miller, motor vehicles, motorcycles, passenger restrictions.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and the amazing members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. I am Delegate April Miller, and I am here to request your continued support of House Bill 102. Last year, this bill passed out of your committee and the House unanimously. However, we just ran out of time to get it passed over in the Senate. I appreciate all the encouragement and advice given to a freshman delegate by this committee. I learned from the experience, and so this year I pre-filed the bill in the exact same posture. I reached out to Senator Carter and she cross-filed with Senate Bill 730. And since it was a pre-file, it won't be listed as yours, but it is in hers, and I did submit that to you. I also submitted my updated testimony from last year to you as well. This bill was brought forward on behalf of a Frederick mom who had had to helplessly watch her ex-husband put her 4-year-old on the back of his motorcycle and take off down the highway. Our Maryland motorcycle laws are not protecting our youngest children, all while Maryland car seat laws are updated frequently to reflect new safety protocols and technology. This bill simply says that to be a passenger on a motorcycle, you must be able to securely reach the rear passenger foot pegs. Riding on a motorcycle is more dangerous as they are less stable, less visible, and have less protection than a vehicle, and the injuries can be catastrophic. So please help protect Maryland children with your continued support and a favorable report on House Bill 102. Thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you, Delegate Miller. Are there any questions? Vice Chair Boyce.
Oh, sorry. Good to see you, Delegate Miller, and thank you so much for bringing back this bill. I had a random question just about Are children in general allowed on motorcycles?
There's no law saying that they can't.
No age restriction, no
No.
height restriction?
No,
So
nothing.
interesting. Thank you so much.
No, you're welcome.
I do not see any other. I do not see any other questions. So that concludes the bill hearing on HB 102. Thank you, Delegate Miller.
Thank you.
Is Delegate Jones here, House Bill 111? If you have a panel, feel free to bring them on up. Delegate Jacobs, you're going to sit at your seat, right? You're not going to go up and testify with her?
You want to come on? Okay. Always welcome to, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and members of the Environment and Transportation Committee. It's good to see everyone today. I come back before you today to introduce HB 111. Last year, this bill passed this committee unanimously, and I thank you for it. And the House Chamber, it passed by a vote of 135 to 2, just as a quick reminder. Current Maryland law forbids bicyclists on sidewalks as the default statewide. However, localities can and have overridden this law for safety and other reasons. Unfortunately, this has inadvertently created an inconsistency throughout Maryland for cyclists in many areas of our state, much like my very own district here in 30A, that's Annapolis City and Anne Arundel County. We will have the same road go from city to state, back to county to state, back to city. So the switching between all of these jurisdictions a number of times lead to confusion for those commuting by bike. If this law was consistent throughout the state, not only would those commuting by bike be safer, but it would also help avoid confusion on which laws to follow when traveling across jurisdictions. All of this, of course, is compounded by the safety issues for bicyclists sharing our major roads. They're sharing them with vehicles with, as we know, distracted drivers and kids in the back seat and being hungry and everything else. So this bill advances Maryland zero deaths goals by aligning Maryland code with safe and equitable biking. As many of you know, localities throughout the state have already enacted similar local bills allowing cyclists on sidewalks, including Montgomery, Howard, Anne Arundel counties, as well as our very own capital city of Annapolis. And so I think the important part too, which was just highlighted by our very own Baltimore banner on January 17th, that Maryland roadways were growing more dangerous for pedestrians and cyclists in 2023. It's truly threatening to undo the state's progress that we had during the pandemic. The Baltimore banner found that car crashes involving pedestrians and cyclists rose 9% in the state last year, the largest year-over-year increase, according to the analysis that the banner did of Maryland State Police crashes. So any headway that we made through the pandemic with folks on the road less are completely being undone. By the end of 2023, there were just over 3,600 of these crashes, resulting in 152 deaths and over 3,000 injuries. So as I said before, the pace of increase raises a lot of worry when we looked at the prospect that 2024 could in fact represent the year in which all of the state's post-pandemic progress is completely undone. So while I'm so thrilled that this bill in fact passed last year, the newest data out shows that this situation is still dangerous, potentially more dangerous, and something truly should be done. And with that, I thank you, and I hope you will find the same conclusions this year for HB 111.
Thank you. Again, my name is Joshua Feldmark with Bike Maryland. Thank you, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and the rest of the members of the committee. I'm here today. You're probably wondering why I'm here today representing the unicyclists. Just kidding. So I won't belabor the point because as you you passed this unanimously last year. I always use two examples when we talk about this. Picture a 10-year-old biking her way to school. And as the law currently stands, if she is on the sidewalk, she is breaking the law. If she is in the middle of the road, she is compliant. Also, if you will, picture my 77-year-old mother. In the Senate, I made her 78 and she literally called me that night. Which like, thanks mom for paying attention to the stuff I do. She too, who enjoys riding her bicycle, but would be terrified to ride it on the road. And it would be dangerous, certainly for her, but I think for others, whereas on the sidewalk is the place where it makes sense. I will also just sort of caution you, you're about to hear from somebody who opposes this bill as it is written. He's a good friend of the bike people, despite our current disagreement. And his issue is that he believes this should not include e-bikes. And while we appreciate that, and I think there's some discussion, we would urge you to reject sort of including them as or excluding them. First of all, because the locals, again, will have the ability to tweak it for where it makes sense. E-bikes are largely mobility devices. They're being used by elderly and folks who are less secure on the bike. And then finally, there are three classes of e-bikes.
Great. Thanks, Joshua. And hello to your mom at home.
Yeah.
Any questions for this panel? Delegate Foley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Feldmark, you brought up e-bikes, which is a concern I have about this bill, to be honest with you. And I voted for it last year, but I still am concerned about that issue. I thought it was taken care of in the bill by describing bicycles as not including mopeds. But now you're telling me that e-bikes are included in this bill?
There is nuance in the law, and I have to check to make sure. There are three different classes of e-bikes, and only one of those classes has a throttle. So the other two are called pedal assist. If you're not pedaling, then there is no, like, the bike's not going. And so if you are to sort of consider to class 2, which is the ones with throttle, which would be the ones that you see that are like mopeds, that would be the one, so that would be the one that's actually a motorized vehicle.
And that would be prohibited on the sidewalks. Is that correct?
I mean, it might have to be specified. Yeah.
I mean, but that's the way I read the bill, that you're saying that e-bike is considered a moped.
I would say that you should check with your lawyers. I can look it up and I will get back to you. But I'm not 100% sure, and I've learned not to say something if I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, thank you. And it does exclude e-scooters, right? The bill does not.
I'm not sure it addresses e-scooters.
It doesn't address e-scooters.
So.
Okay.
It excludes mopeds.
Yeah, well, okay. And is an e-scooter a moped?
E-scooter is
No.
not classified as a moped that I'm aware of, but we
No, but if it's, I don't know how it's classified in the law, but if it's not specified in there, it's not classified as a bicycle.
Then it wouldn't be classified, yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions for this panel? I do. Oh, thank you. Delegate Baker.
Chair's bill number.
What was last bill's? I apologize. Let me just, while I look for that. Oh, there we go. It's 519. I almost got that number mixed up with the 27 other states that allow this. My apologies. I just saw a number.
How many states was that?
19 states already allow it, and 8 additional states already allow the same exact bill that this is. So all in all, that is 27.
Great. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Delegate Jones. Mr. Feldmark, we will turn to the opposition witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
James
Thank you, Mr.
Titus.
Chair.
Hello, I'm Jim Titus from District 22 with information that you did not hear last year, which is basically in this red and green table that I hope from the beginning of my testimony, which I hope all or most of you have, which enumerates the impact of this bill on every jurisdiction in the state. We talk about changing the default rule. First question is, well, who actually is following the default rule? First block in this table shows that 20 counties comprising about 55% of the state population will have their rule changed, both for regular bikes and for e-bikes, all e-scooters, just to make that clear. You might wonder, why are they following the default rule? Is that because they like the existing rule or because they just are not paying attention? We don't know. Next category, 13% of the population lives in 20 cities that have actually outlawed sidewalk biking on their own. But those laws don't include e-bikes, don't mention e-bikes. So with this bill on the sidewalks of Baltimore, Aberdeen, Cumberland, and Rock Hall, and many other cities, one will be allowed to ride an e-bike at 25 miles an hour, but you still can't ride a regular bike. Does that make any sense? Next, we have Howard and Montgomery, where regular bikes are already allowed on sidewalks, but not e-bikes. Does this bill do them a favor by legalizing all e-bikes on all sidewalks and e-scooters too? Or is it more reasonable to assume that with time, like DC, they would adopt a more nuanced approach, maybe allowing some of them on some of their sidewalks, perhaps excluding areas like downtown Bethesda? This bill legalizes all e-bikes and e-scooters on 98% of Maryland sidewalks. You don't yet have enough information to be confident that that is safe. I would urge you to please consider my amendment, which I've attached to my testimony, which would allow the basic goal, which is to let stuff move forward, but not e-bikes. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I do not see any. Thank you for joining us. That concludes the bill hearing on HB 111. Colleagues, we will jump to our prodigal member who has returned, HB 150, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, Vehicle Emissions Inspection Program and Diesel Vehicle Emissions Control Program. Welcome back.
Thank you. It's great to be back. It's great to see all of you. Some of the chairs, people in the chairs have moved a little bit. It looks great. See Delegate Love in my old seat. So thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you, members of the Environment and Transportation Committee, both chair, vice chair, and members, for affording me the opportunity to speak to you on behalf of House Bill 150. You did hear this bill last year. There were some late amendments that came in. I think the thought would be to have this year to just talk about those amendments in a little bit more detail. But essentially what the bill does is it puts on a level playing field all of the vehicles, all the cars and trucks in Maryland under 10,000 pounds that burn fossil fuels. So most of you know about the vehicle emissions program. You take your car in and you have your car tested, and you pay $14 every 2 years. That's great, and that's a start to dealing with emissions issues in the state. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't take into consideration historic vehicles, antique vehicles, or specifically, it doesn't take into consideration diesel vehicles. And the reason it doesn't take into consideration diesel vehicles is because the EPA in the mid-90s decided that as they were quantifying state-related aid and making sure that we test for emissions, they did not include, and there was no credit given for diesel vehicles. So diesel vehicles since that period of time have been able to not only not test, not pass, but not pay. So we understand that some of the older vehicles, and we understand that diesel vehicles aren't going to be able to pass emissions testing. That's okay. We're not here to take their vehicles away from them. We're just saying, at the very least, if you could pay the $14 every couple of years, we could use that money in the Strategic Energy Investment Fund or the TTF to just kind of help move policy forward when it comes to electrification and the cleaning up of our transportation sector. So it's pretty simple. Like I said, it doesn't require them to pass it. It just says you at least have to pay the $14. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo. Any questions for this sponsor or bill? I do not see any. Thank you for visiting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
That concludes the bill hearing on HB 150. We'll now turn to our own Delegate Lehman with HB 113, vehicle laws, horse riding, helmet requirements for minors. Please do.
Good afternoon, Chair Corman and Vice Chair Boyce and esteemed colleagues. For the record, I'm Delegate Mary Lehman, asking for your favorable report again this year for a bill that requires helmets for equestrians under age 18 who are riding a horse on public property or taking lessons or training on property owned by a commercial barn. So this bill, numbered HB 113 this year, passed the full House last year, but got hung up in the Senate. So I worked during the interim with the one senator in particular who had concerns. In fact, I traveled to his farm with Jane over the summer to address those issues. And I actually believe as a result of those conversations that this is a better bill this year. So I made two changes, and then I am bringing a friendly amendment as well. So I'm going to just focus on those changes in that amendment. So first of all, this year's bill drops an exemption that had existed the prior 2 years for Western riders. It turns out Western riders did not want to be exempt from this bill. We were surprised to learn that. They actually have a requirement that I believe has been submitted with my written testimony, a form that they have for their members saying if they are minors, they must wear helmets. So we were happy to find that out. Then the second change is where it more clearly defines property to which the bill applies, tying it specifically to the grounds of any facility that solicits or offers to the public recreational, educational, or competitive equestrian activities. So this is going to include both publicly owned barns like the Equestrian Center in Upper Marlboro and privately owned barns. My friendly amendment will add the term therapeutic to the public property definition, and that is needed because we are exempting riders who receive occupational, physical, or speech therapy treatment from a licensed medical professional. That language is specific in there. And that's because these folks are unable to wear helmets because of their limitations. And in which case, though, they don't go without a helmet, an alternative helmet is required. So you're going to hear more from witnesses about the risks of accidents and traumatic brain injury and why it makes sense, frankly, to have minors in Maryland wear helmets when they're riding horses, just as they are currently required under the law to wear helmets when they are riding bicycles, scooters, and inline skates. And I thank you for your favorable consideration. Mr. Chairman, I ask that my two panelists go next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, my name is Jane Sigler, and I am here representing the Maryland Horse Council, which is the trade association for the entire horse industry in Maryland. Our written testimony contains some data and statistics about the risk of head injuries in equestrian activities and the role of helmets in mitigating the damage of those injuries. So I won't go into that here, but I do want to bring up two data points. One is that 16% of Maryland horse owners and 33% of Marylanders who ride but do not own the horses they ride are under the age of 18. Another factor is that 45% of horse owners and 67% of non-horse owning mounted participants and unmounted enthusiasts nationally have annual household incomes under $100,000 a year. And 42% of owners and enthusiasts had household incomes under $50,000 a year. Now, the relevance of that fact is that if you have a child who sustains a traumatic brain injury, it's more than likely that that child will receive some kind of public funding for its medical care and life care for the course of its life. So ultimately, there is a public interest in this bill, which is preventing that extra cost on the taxpayers. We support the amendments having to do with therapeutic. And we just want to say there are two laws that I know of in Florida and New York that have similar bills, and both of those bills occurred because of the death of a child from an equestrian injury. And I would just ask you to not let that happen here.
All right. For the record, my name is Rachel Neff. I'm the executive director at Promise Landing Farm, and I chair the Equine Assisted Services Committee for the Maryland Horse Council. In my role as chair, I work with equine professionals across the state who provide riding and other activities to children with physical, mental, emotional, and learning disabilities. We estimate that approximately 2,500 Maryland children are receiving these sorts of services each year, and almost all of those programs are at capacity and have a waiting list. which means that there are people desperately seeking services who can't necessarily get in with qualified professionals, and they might be pushed to the edges to places where safety standards are not as high. Most of my colleagues already require that their participants wear riding helmets, but we want to make sure that these families, especially people who are desperate for services, people who are new to horses and don't know what kind of red flags they're looking for, will be in a place where they're safe and their children are protected. So I'd ask for your favorable report for this bill and also for the friendly amendment, which makes it clear that these services and medical treatment that's taking place on horseback are covered by the bill and provides an exception for the very small number of children who need to use alternative helmets when they're beginning their treatment. Thank you.
Thank you. We have any questions for this panel or the sponsor? Okay, I do not see any questions. So thank you, Delegate Lehman.
And I have two more in-person witnesses, I believe, Mr. Chair, and I have two remote witnesses, including a horse. So
yeah, I got you. I see one more in person. I think Barbara Soliner Webb, and everybody else is virtual, including the horse. Please go ahead when you're ready.
Hi, I would have been happy to bring my horse in person. I'm Barbara Salter Webb, a lifetime Maryland resident, small farm owner who loves to enjoy Maryland's beautiful outdoor areas, especially by riding my sweet horses. Of course, always when wearing a riding helmet. For years, I've supported Delegate Lehman's important legislation for minors to wear helmets while riding public lands, which is a brilliant public health initiative. Almost every equestrian has had or knows someone who had a freak accident where possible serious brain injury was averted or at least minimized due to the rider wearing a helmet. I personally would have been permanently impaired, if not killed, in a bad freak horse accident years ago, had it not been for the protection of my helmet, which I'll mention shattered in the accident. For decades, all rides that I've organized have required that helmets be worn by everyone who participates, and I encourage everyone to wear a helmet when out riding, especially minors. According to a recent University of Connecticut survey, possibility of death by head injuries is reduced 70 to 80% by wearing a helmet. And a survey of Maryland trail riders showed that well over 90% of respondents supported helmets being required for minor riders. Since helmets are required for youths riding bicycles, scooters, and inline skates, surely they should be required for children who are riding horses too. To help protect Maryland's youth from suffering serious brain injury when riding horses on public lands, please pass HB 113. Thank you for your time and attention.
Thank you. Any questions for this witness? I do not see any. We'll turn to our virtual witnesses, Victoria Pitcha and Karen Fulton. Neither of those sound like horse names, Delegate Lehman. Let's go ahead. Karen Fulton, we can't hear you.
Oh, I haven't started talking. I didn't know I was on.
Please
Can you
go
hear
ahead.
me?
We can. Go ahead.
Great. Hi, I'm Karen Fulton. I'm a co-owner of Full Moon Farm here in beautiful Finksburg, Maryland in Carroll County. I'm here with my little pal Oliver, who's being super helpful wearing his helmet in favor of approving this bill. Full Moon Farm is a full service facility. We've been here for 30 years. We teach about 200 students a week. We have taught literally thousands of people to ride. And we have seen in the past 30 years, our share of accidents, Oliver says, yeah, I'm gonna take my helmet off. Our share of accidents, both severe and not so severe. And knock on wood, I can honestly say we have not had any severe traumatic brain injuries in those past 30 years. And the reason is because we have required for the last 30 years, all of our riders to have helmets, no matter how old, young, good, bad the riders are. We require them to wear helmets. Horseback riding is a unique sport. There's no other sport that allows you to ride a 1,000-pound prey animal that has thoughts and feelings of their own. And very often things happen that you don't anticipate. You can't always say that you're going to protect yourself in a fall. Very often when you fall, you don't actually fall on your head, which is, I think, some mistakes people make thinking about helmets, but you may, those injuries go along with that. And even if you're falling from someone Oliver's size, and again, for perspective, Oliver is a miniature horse. Any fall can be traumatic, especially if your head is not protected. So we really feel it's super important to approve this bill, just for all the reasons everyone else has said. Thank you for your time. Oliver says, yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you. And thank you, Oliver. Victoria, please go ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Victoria Pickup. I appear before you today as an active youth participant in Maryland's horse community. I am also a junior member of the Maryland Horse Council and have been active with that for several years. From 6 years old, horses have been an integral part of my life. Growing up and working on my family's working horse farm, I have a profound understanding of the beauty and unpredictability of horses. Use for youth equestrians in Maryland. In the equestrian world, expert opinions and safety guidelines consistently advocate for the use of helmets. Whether I personally am competing, trail riding, playing polo, or jumping, I always wear a helmet for my safety. Our horse community in Maryland has embraced prioritizing safety through correctly fitted and in regulation helmets. Passing this bill would reinforce this commitment, preventing countless brain injuries and ensuring the safety of our future equestrians. I urge you to consider the gravity of this matter. Enforcing helmet use for youth equestrians is not just a matter of safety, it is a commitment to the well-being of our community. I encourage you to support and pass House Bill, taking a significant step towards a safer future for our youth riders. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you very much. I do not see any questions. So that concludes the bill hearing on HB 113. We're going to jump down to HB 64, Delegate Jazz Lewis, Motor Vehicle Excise Tax.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. Give me 1 second. All right. Thank you, Chair Corman, Vice Chair Boyce, and the esteemed members of the Environment and Transportation Committee for this opportunity to discuss the significance of House Bill 64. For the record, I'm Delegate Jazz Lewis. This bill would expand eligibility for the electric vehicle excise tax credit to include qualifying used electric vehicles purchased and titled on or after July 1, 2024 and before July 1, 2027. Under current law, eligibility is limited to qualifying electric vehicles that are purchased new. This expansion is vital in our ongoing battle against climate change and our commitment to reducing greenhouse gas emissions. With transportation being a major pollution contributor, transitioning to electric vehicles is imperative for achieving our state's ambitious climate goals. Why are we here? Firstly, a concerning trend has emerged regarding the purchase of EVs, one that threatens to stall our progress. Reports like the one from Jalopnik point out an uncomfortable truth that the adoption for EVs is unfortunately slowing, hindered by issues like prohibitive purchase prices, an evolving charging infrastructure, and concerns about vehicle range. This slowdown is alarming, and our efforts in promoting EVs must account for these realities, adapting to the evolving needs and capacities of our citizens. Many early and mid-EV adopters are helping to socialize the public to the idea of owning an EV, and for that, I thank them all. However, the sticker shock on these vehicles stands as a formidable barrier. Price is our second concerning trend. According to Kelley Blue Book, the average new electric vehicle costs over $50,000. And the reality is that for many in our state, particularly those in working and middle-class families, the cost of new EVs remains just out of reach. These Marylanders, whose vehicle choices are governed more by budget constraints than by environmental considerations, are being left behind in our green revolution. Not to trivialize the point, as reported by Pew Charitable Trust, only 4 in 10 Americans are even considering purchasing an EV right now. Their biggest concern, as reported by Pew Charitable Trust, other than range, is price. The federal government, via the Inflation Reduction Act, is making strides in investing in battery technology that will result in longer vehicle miles driven and in the build out of a national and charging infrastructure. The federal government has also provided a tax credit for purchasing electric vehicles that extend to new and used vehicles. If we extend our tax credit to used vehicles in Maryland, and if everyday working Marylanders can stack the state and federal benefits, the cost of purchasing a used EV would decline by up to $7,000 on vehicles that don't cost any more than 25 grand, given the federal limitations. Working Marylanders will purchase these vehicles. This is where House Bill 64 comes in bridging this divide. It aims to break down the financial barriers by incentivizing the purchase of used EVs. Let's consider the bigger picture. As per a report by Statista, in 2022 alone, over 38.6 million used vehicles were sold in this country, compared to 13.6 million new ones. Used vehicles aren't just a segment of the market, it's the majority. And by redirecting our focus and extending tax credits to used EVs, we open the door to sustainable vehicle ownership to a wider audience, particularly those for whom cost is the critical factor. Lastly, this bill is about inclusive progress. It's about ensuring the shift to a cleaner, greener vehicle isn't a privilege for the few, but available to many. This in turn helps us make significant strides in reducing fossil fuel reliance and achieving our environmental targets we've set as a state. For these reasons, I urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for this sponsor? Delegate Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Delegate Lewis. So if I understand correctly, we were already giving tax credits for new electric vehicles. We further understand that the electrical vehicle market is slowing down tremendously. So now we want to cap it off by creating a tax credit for buying used vehicles. So an individual basically could buy a new vehicle, buy a used vehicle, and double down on all those tax credits. Am I right?
I'm going to try to follow that. This bill is not creating a new tax credit. I want to first extend that. It doesn't also extend the pool of the money that is available via the tax credit. It just says that the tax credit that's currently available to new vehicles will also extend to used ones. The issue for the slowing down isn't for lack of desire really among people. It's just that the price for the brand new ones are cost prohibitive. And as people who've already bought them start thinking, hey, you know what, I want the newest and latest whatever, then many of the other working Marylanders who want to try it, they just want to make sure that we can help lower that cost. So when you stack the federal and the state tax credits right now, you can get up to $10,500 off on a new vehicle. For a used vehicle, the max you can get is $4 grand. That's all federal because we don't apply anything at the state.
Isn't it also then true that the used vehicle would have depreciated over time also? So that price has also been dropped down as any other depreciable asset?
Well, I mean, every asset you purchase depreciates over time, but sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't.
Yeah,
I'm trying to answer your question. I don't know.
No, that's fine. You've answered it for me. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Delegate Allen.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Delegate. I'm liking this bill. My question is, I was reading the definition of an EV in the bill. As you understand it, would this include because most hybrids now are plug-in hybrids, so they can take that external source of power. So would this apply to plug-in hybrids?
I believe based on the battery size, it will include plug-in hybrids. The battery is big enough. I think it will include them.
Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Okay. Thank you, Whip. I don't know if you saw, but while you were testifying, Talmadge Branch snuck in the back for a little bit, then he snuck back out. So we had, generations here.
You had two whips in here today.
I felt very intimidated. Colleagues, that concludes the hearing on HB 64. We will now turn to HB 72, Departmental Bill from the Motor Vehicle Administration. And
Have a blessed day. Thank you.
Thank you. And bring up our Motor Vehicle Administrator.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Vice Chair, and committee members. For the record, my name is Chrissy Nizer. I'm Administrator of the Motor Vehicle Administration, and it's a pleasure to be with you here today testifying in support of House Bill 72. I know you have our position paper, so I just want to briefly review the intention of the bill. It does remove the requirement that the MVA charge a $30 restoration fee to vehicle owners whose registration was flagged as a result of an outstanding arrest warrant in the past. The outstanding arrest warrant was originally put in place to cover the cost to enforce this registration process. However, MVA recently implemented our IT modernization system, Customer Connect, which merged all of our legacy systems together, making these kind of enforcement actions very easy. Not only did it streamline the services, but it also allows us to look at some of the inefficiencies that are created. Frankly, the fee is outdated and unnecessary from an administrative standpoint and imposes a financial burden for those who are least able to afford it. That is clear by the rate at which we're able to collect this, which is not significant. Customers impacted by the restoration fee are often facing other financial burdens we recognize, including legal fees and court fines associated with that outstanding arrest. The removal of the $30 restoration fee charged by the MVA would help lessen that fee for the individuals, as well as the impact that we see oftentimes with co-owners. So if the flag is on the vehicle, the co-owner also cannot renew the registration without taking certain action. So it not only impacts the person who directly had that flag, but also anybody else on the vehicle. For those reasons, I respectfully ask the committee to provide a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Delegate Healy.
Thank you very much, and thank you for bringing this legislation. I think it's a good idea. I wanted to ask a related question, and I wondered if you have administratively found a way to fix this particular issue. Sometimes you get a flag, people get a flag because they got a parking ticket, and they pay the parking ticket, but the jurisdiction doesn't notify MVA. And so there's even though it's been paid, they still have the flag and they still go through all the problems of trying to get their car registered. Have you found a fix for that?
So it's a great question. It's not a fix that we have in place today, but we have active conversations ongoing. In certain cases, I think we would be willing actually to capture the fee on the front end and remit it back to the jurisdictions. That's a conversation that we're having currently with certain flagging jurisdictions because frankly, they don't have the infrastructure in place that we do from an IT standpoint. And it's very frustrating for the customer, and they wind up coming to us and being caught in the middle of the situation. So
they contact their legislators as well.
Understand completely. So we are actively having those conversations. Happy to keep you updated as that moves forward. But looking at innovative things with even our current modes, SHA with the Works and Safety Program, and some other things where we can build kind of models that some of the local jurisdictions might be able
I'd be
to
happy to help
follow.
you if you need any help on fixing that particular problem. Thank you.
Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So my understanding is that this is a fee decrease?
It would be the elimination of a fee.
Yeah,
Yes,
elimination
that's
of a
right.
fee. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, we always like to repeal fees, but I did want to point out that the fiscal note says that transportation trust fund revenues would decrease by almost 140,000 in fiscal year 2025, and then in out years that number goes up to 180,000. And I guess my question is, given the problems that we know we have, these structural problems with the transportation trust fund, I understand that maybe the fee itself was just sort of outdated in terms of like the number of man and woman hours required to administer it from a perspective where we're kind of jealous for every last dollar in the transportation trust fund so we can avoid the kinds of draconian cuts that had been proposed a few months ago. I'm just wondering how we can afford this.
No, I appreciate the question. Thank you for that. While it does show a reduction in revenue, for context, there's over $1 million in these fines that remain unpaid. So there are costs that the agency is incurring in order to be able to attempt to recover many of these fines, many of which, frankly, have never and may never be able to be collected. So while we certainly recognize any reduction is significant in today's environment, in any environment, at the same time, we felt like this was one fee that just didn't make sense, frankly, because of the fact that one, so many individuals are not able to pay it. And then there's this huge uncollectible amount, which that historic flag is still impacting people, even if it happened 6 years ago, 8 years ago, whatever the time frame is, that follows them forward.
And that makes sense. And do you have like an estimate of how many dollars are spent on collection costs for every dollar received? Because that might help us parse the fiscal note.
We do. It is mailing costs, and I think we provided some of that. And mailing costs, probably not significant when it comes to the 100,000, but it just felt like in weighing the two, this huge amount of money that's on the books, over $1 million sitting there, not being able to be collected for years and years versus, the effort of continuing the process and not ability to pay. That's the calculation we made.
Okay, thanks very much.
Any further questions on this bill? Okay, that concludes the bill hearing on HB 72, but don't go away. You're up for HB 161, Departmental Bill, Vehicles Law, Driver's License, Learner's Instructional Permits.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Again, for the record, Chrissy Nizer, MBA Administrator, here in support of House Bill 161. And really, this is a result of asking members of our team to look for, again, efficiencies, how we do things better. And so we bring before you some things that we hope from a customer service standpoint will aid to the many things that we've done in the last several years. For instance, House Bill 161 will permit the MBA to issue an ID card for certain populations at no charge. Over the last several years, MBA has reduced ID card costs for our homeless individuals, as well as individuals who were incarcerated, to $1, but under state law, we are currently required to charge for them. So we are not allowed to reduce it to $0 without your authorization. As you can imagine, charging $1 for these situations is more than, we're not collecting more than we are paying in terms of costs. And frankly, it's really creating a burden. I anecdotally heard a story at one of our branches of a homeless individual literally asking somebody for $1 so he could get an ID card. That's really unacceptable and not something we want to condone. So we are pushing forward that change in order to allow us to provide that better service. It is a small number of individuals in this population. I just want to emphasize, based on our prior conversation, we're talking about 1,000 people depending on the year. So it's not a large impact. And again, the cost is more than we are recovering here. There's also an additional provision that allows us to address a challenge for our customers who work abroad as documented civilian contractors with the armed forces and the State Department. As you know, there's several provisions in statute already for our military and various members, but each month we get about 15 to 20 requests from customers who are deployed overseas, who have a driver's license or ID card that expires, and they don't have a means of renewing it because they fall into this category. And currently there's nothing in the statute that allows us to assist these individuals. Obviously, we just think this is a common sense approach. Our military functions in a different way than maybe it did 20, 30 years ago, and it has grown in terms of the number of people who supported in this effort. And so we'd like to extend that service to them as well. We have an existing process that would take care of them just as it does currently. And finally, House Bill 161 extends a non-GLS learner's permit from 6 months to 1 year. And frankly, this is consistent with what the committee has done as we've requested over the last several years. So we've increased commercial driver's license permits, graduate license permits, and now we're asking for the last one. This helps motorcycle operators as well as individuals coming with an out-of-country license to have 12 months to learn how to drive and not to feel rushed, which was the whole idea behind moving from 6 to 12 months. If they complete it early, they can, go through the process, but it does not make them feel like they have to test or lose that and have to go through the process again. So for all these reasons, we think this is a common sense measure that would help many of our constituents, and we respectfully ask the committee for a favorable report.
Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, Administrator Nizer. I will say what I say every time you come before us. Thank you for everything that you do. You run a great shop. I have one question, though. The requirement, the bill expands the fee exemption to any applicant who presents documentation showing that they are homeless. How does someone show documentation of that?
That's a great question. So even for an ID card, we still have to issue an address on that card. So the process we use is we work with the homeless shelters throughout the state. They provide a letter on their letterhead, just documenting the individual's address. Sometimes it's temporary at the homeless shelter. Sometimes they're working with a network in the community, but we have relationships with the homeless shelter and an existing process in place. So we just follow that same process for this.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you, Administrator. Colleagues, that concludes our bill hearings. Just a couple of PSA announcements. First, sorry for the cold in here. They're working on a part to fix our temperature situation. So sorry about that. Keep bringing those blankets and coats to committee. Second, we were going to vote tomorrow, but since it's a pro forma session, we don't have to be on the House floor. We're going to push that off till Tuesday. So look out for a voting sheet for Tuesday after our bill hearings and before any subcommittees. I'm supposed to remind you that you need to get your blue backs in if you have them. I know some people don't have them back yet, but if you have them and you're just holding on to them, either don't put the bill in, great idea, or go ahead and get it dropped. And I know, again, some people are still waiting for blue backs. And then finally, subcommittee announcements. Delegate Love.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Motor Vehicle and Transportation will meet at 3:15. 3:15 online. Thank you.
Delegate Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, this is a very early notice, but since the Land Use and Ethics Subcommittee, well, since we're not going to be here Friday or Monday, we will not meet prior to the Land Use and Ethics Subcommittee's organizational meeting, which will be held over Zoom at noon. It'll just be 4 or 5 minutes. Noon on Tuesday. Sorry about that. Noon on Tuesday over Zoom, 4 minutes. Thank you.
Great. Any other announcements? Delegate Love, do you have another announcement? Okay. Great. Well, thank you all. We are adjourned. Have a great afternoon.